Square Ball Podcast.
Hello there, welcome to the show. It's brought to you in association with West Yorkshire Electrical. Michael loves their services, don't you?
Correct. I love all electrical things,
Yep.
especially ones they do, like solar panels, battery storage, school contracting.
Why do you like school contracting? Is it?
Well, I don't. I like that they do it because they're good at it.
Yep.
They do sort all the electrics out there.
Fire alarm systems as well.
Correct.
Very, very important. Security alarms for your home and your business. All this stuff as well with finance available for both. wyelectrical.co.uk for details. You can search West Yorkshire Electrical on social media as well to get up to speed with that. Phil's here as well. Hello, Phil. You all
Hello.
right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Been a busy old week, hasn't it?
Fairly. Yeah.
Are you enjoying the transfer window?
It's been quite quiet so far, isn't it? A couple of outgoings. That's kind of
Is that
kind
it?
of been
And that will...
Yeah, that's us done. Yeah, see you on February the 1st.
Yeah.
No, I suspect not. But yeah, it's been kind of, I wouldn't say uneventful in the sense that we have had a couple of players going and quite notable players. But, with Ayling, not unexpected. It's from an incoming point of view, it's just yet to get going, isn't it?
Yeah, we've done a special on Luke Ayling where we've talked about this from like a fan's perspective, so we probably don't need to retread that. But Phil, it'd be interesting to get your take on it from a journalistic point of view. Like you say, in a football sense, because you've seen a big outpouring of emotion. The club have really gone to town on the stuff that they've put out about Luke Ayling, and rightly so, because he's earned all the plaudits that he's getting on his way out to Middlesbrough. The reaction's not surprising, is it, I suppose? But it's still quite powerful.
It is. I was asked to write about him for today, and obviously wanted to write about him for today. And I was saying in the read that we've done that I think you do have to with Ayling, despite everything round about him. And I think he was a really good role model at Leeds and is a good role model, I think, for footballers generally, going right back to the start of his career and his decision to go from Arsenal, which is kind of the centre of the universe or thereabouts in English football, to Yeovil, which absolutely isn't, and understanding that it was the best thing for him to do and the best way to get his career going. I think, I remember Dominic Matteo saying to me once, whenever he speaks to young players, he says, don't try to be like Lionel Messi, try to be like James Milner. And I think you could almost apply the same sort of thing to Ayling to a certain extent. Kind of infinitely worse players to base yourself on when it comes to attitude and application. But the fact is that as a footballer for Leeds, he was exceptionally good. And what I find funny with him is the way in which he and others, were kind of tailor-made for Bielsa, even though it wasn't Bielsa who signed them. Ayling was at Leeds 2 years before Bielsa came to Elland Road. But if Ayling hadn't been there, you get the sense that Bielsa would have either externally or by creating one himself tried to find the right back who was basically Luke Ayling, because it worked perfectly for him. And I've written before about the Huddersfield goal, which was, the moment that jumps out. But I think the thing that defines Ayling best is the Hernandez goal at Swansea, which again I was touching on in this piece, and the sort of 90-yard run from one byline to the other, which was, that was Leeds, that was Bielsa, that was Ayling, and that was kind of his moment. It was Hernandez's finish, and it's Hernandez who's remembered for that. But the power of the move was from Ayling's running and him doing what he did so often. When he was first left out of the squad, and when we first asked Farke about that, and Farke said it was a really difficult decision and it's one of the most difficult things I've had to do. And I think Farke saying that made you realise straight away that this was coming to the end, that there was a changing of the guard, that Farke was going to start looking at other players and wasn't going to involve Ayling as much as Ayling would want to be involved. We spoke on the podcast after that. We said, important to handle these things in the right way. But it might be that Farke's idea that Ayling is still a really sort of strong and positive presence in the background, or a kind of, I guess, bit of a shoulder to lean on for the rest of the season, might be a bit fanciful, because when it comes to it, Ayling would want to play, wouldn't just want to be kind of supporting cast member or a babysitter in the background who's there for his experience and his personality, but actually isn't getting on the pitch. I mean, despite the way football is, you tend to find with most players that they do really love playing football and they do want to play football. You get some players who, see it very much as a job. And I have no problem with that at all. If they do it properly, and they play well and they apply themselves, it's not a necessity and it's not a prerequisite that you have to actually love what you're doing. And this isn't a mea culpa of my job, by the way. But they, with Ayling, I think he absolutely wants to play. So I always wondered when January came round whether it was really going to be feasible to say to him, look, you're hardly going to get a game, but it'd be great to have you in the background. And clearly it isn't. Also, but my understanding is that I think Ayling was quite hopeful that he might get a contract extension at some point this season, another 12 months on top of what he had already, because his deal is up in the summer. That wasn't going to happen. It had been made clear to him that it wasn't going to happen. And again, I think when you get into that situation, you do find yourself thinking, well, in that case, I need to think about fresh pastures. So I do feel like this is the best decision. I think it's a good decision from a footballing point of view because I don't think Ayling is anymore at the top of his powers, even though he's gone to another championship club. I think some of the games were tough for him this season. But also, I don't see any value in clinging on to somebody who wants to be out and wants to be getting a game. Do
you think he'd be making this move if it was to, I don't know, say Swansea or Cardiff, like somewhere further afield? Because Middlesbrough obviously is fairly convenient for him in that he probably isn't going to have to move house. I know
he lives in Knaresborough, doesn't he?
Yeah, he put in his letter about how he's, in the time he's been at the club, he's become a dad and his family's very important to him, all that sort of stuff. You do wonder if maybe this is it's just slotted into place for him and he's thought, well, because I do want to play, but I also don't want to move. It just sort of works for him, I suppose. I was
going to say, it makes it easier.
Yeah, in terms of where the training ground is at Rockcliffe, isn't it? Which is just off the A1 at Darlington. So you're kind of only going half an hour up the motorway further than you would be to Thorpe Arch.
You do find as well, and I've seen this before with other players, one who jumps to mind straight away is Andrew Hughes, that they move to Yorkshire, they get very settled in Yorkshire, particularly in that North Yorkshire area, and they do want to stick around there. They're happy there and it's a good place to be based. I think there's another aspect to it as well, which is that Ayling is out of contract in the summer, so when the summer comes round, he can look at his options fully and can seriously consider what's on the table. Whereas this here and now, you're right, it doesn't require any relocation. It gives him a much better chance of playing before the season finishes. It's still in the Championship, which is at the level he's at now. It's with a good side, and decent club in Borough as well. So it kind of works. And I think the club understood that they were in saying to him, and I think Farke's tried to do this, but in saying to him, we value you around the dressing room. Players, particularly at Ayling's age, don't really want to be told that. We value you around the dressing room, but you're not going to get a game.
I was going to say the subtext is there, but not really that much on the pitch anymore.
Yeah, and I think the subtext as well comes from, you won't be getting a contract at the end of this. So when people say to you, we value you around here, it's almost like saying we value your personality, but as a footballer, it's not really for us anymore. So the timing, I think, is right. It does, I think, put the pressure on to bring fullbacks in because obviously Spence has gone already. But this is one of those situations where everybody has to kind of face facts, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Just on Spence, going to Genoa, there's an option there for about €10 million in that deal, which is, it feels like it's certainly not the top of the mountain, is it? I guess is what I'm getting at. It feels like he's gone past that with the move to Spurs, and everybody's now trying to find a place for him in football, and it's not quite clear where that is.
Again, we've got a piece on him coming towards the end of the week, and it is kind of focused on what next for him, because there's no denying that he had a really strong season at Forest, and it was so strong that it ended up in the Championship Team of the Year, made himself look like the best right back or the best right wing back in the division. And it's worth saying that Forest tended to play with a back five as opposed to the back four that Leeds had, so it was a different role. But again, no question that he's a very talented footballer and has a lot of natural ability. But going through his career and the clubs that he's been at, you find, in terms of first team football, you find 4 where it hasn't really worked and where people don't retain particularly fond memories, and you find 1 where they absolutely do. And there is graffiti down on the bridge, the Trent Bridge, which says, we miss you, Jed Spence, because that's what Forest thought of him. But it's not really like that at Middlesbrough, and it's not like that at Leeds. He hasn't really made a scratch at Tottenham, and he was at Rennes last season, but played only a small handful of games. So I guess the quote from Neil Warnock, which was this right back could be Premier League or could be non-league, kind of still applies. And in no way is Serie A non-league. He's going to play against some of Europe's elite over there. But I think you can still ask, how and when is Spence going to settle, and what is it going to look like for him when he did? And I think Farke was pretty careful not to throw him under the bus completely. But The biggest issue for Farke, I think, were the performance levels. Just weren't quite right, weren't exactly what he was looking for. But there were issues with lateness and things like that. And it was one of those situations where, in the end, it made more sense for Leeds to send him back because it just wasn't working for them. Tottenham kind of ruled straight away that he'd train with the 21s and that he would go out again. They didn't want to play him in the FA Cup, for example, because he would have played for 2 clubs in a season and you're not allowed to play for 3, and the idea was to move him on again. But I don't think there was any suggestion that Postecoglou was going to have another look. It was a case of finding a move for him. And because Tottenham have managed to do a deal for Dragistan, it means that Spence can go the other way. And I've seen the reports saying that Spurs will pick up 100% of his wage going to Genoa. And okay, it's a make weight in that transfer, but I think that alone says quite a lot.
In terms of right backs, then, where are we? Are we going to get somebody in? Because we've talked in the last 7 days about it seemingly being quiet. We started the show just today saying it doesn't seem like there's a right lot going on. Doesn't mean that there isn't stuff going on in the background, just to reiterate that point, because I say it's like a red rag to a bull when you say it seems quiet at the moment.
Quiet in the sense of things crossing the line, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there must be, surely. From a fan's perspective, we need to know that they're on this.
They are. My impression was that they always would be active on fullbacks in this month, irrespective of what happened with Spence, and knowing that there was a chance that Ayling would go. And my understanding is that they still are. I mean, I mentioned Nico Williams on Monday at Forest as somebody that they really, really do like. But all the indications from Forest are that Nuno, who's just come in for Steve Cooper, also really likes him and is not interested in letting him go. The links to Connor Roberts, who again is on the radar at Burnley. I'm reading some bits this morning saying that Burnley seem to be more and more open to letting him go, depending on what the offer is and depending on what the price is. So there are options out there. I was a little surprised after Spence returned to Tottenham to see Farke say that he was quite happy with his options at fullback. I don't think it's that Leeds are kind of desperately short in those positions, but they feel a little bit exposed. And I've said this a few times now, but I think particularly because Byram is starting to pick up the odd injury here and there now, and if he's fit and he's available to play all the time, then you're well covered in that position and you don't have a problem. But if he isn't, then the question's still there to be asked. And the fact is, they've lost two right backs, one of whom I don't think was likely to play much anyway, but one of whom was supposed to be a key player this season.
You just wonder, does that pass the sniff test, whether Farke's just saying that just to keep his existing squad happy and make them feel like they're in the frame? Because if you turn around and you say, well, no, actually, we want to definitely add somebody at right back, I suppose it increases pressure on the market, doesn't it? And also it makes the current incumbents in the form of Archie Gray and Jamie Shack think, well, I'm not getting a game.
I think there are two sides to this. One is that Farke is predominantly happy with the squad. He is generally happy with the group that's there, but I do think that he'll be looking at it now and saying, yeah, we do have to have something else at right back. I think they could do with something else at left back as well. With Firpo, you're just never quite sure if that is going to happen, and it hasn't really shown signs of it looking like it's going to happen. And even aside from the way he plays and his style of game, he got his fitness as well, which has been a problem pretty constantly since he signed. So the prudent thing would be to cover those areas, without a doubt.
Well, we can't bask in the glory of our trip to Wembley, our road to Wembley starting already. Why are you smirking at me?
Home tie.
You're smirking at me,
Home
Phil.
tie. And I wore a replay jumper this morning, which is not to say that I would like a draw against Plymouth. I did message somebody as the draw was finishing and Leeds were still in the hat and the numbers of teams left was decreasing rapidly, and said anything but Plymouth away here.
Well, we got them at home, didn't we?
Yes.
Which is a great relief, because I messaged you as well saying, just think if that tie had been reversed. And that's when you mentioned it, wasn't it? You said like, oh God.
Well, aside from anything else, Leeds have got a lot of travelling to do. A lot of long away trips coming up over the next couple of months. So could definitely do without that. But it's not a bad tie, that, at all. Gives you a real good chance of getting through to the latter stages.
Yes. And
is that what we're calling it? I mean, it's the Leeds United latter stages, isn't it?
Yeah. Clichés was doing a podcast this week and they were talking about what constitutes a cup run. And I think it's not necessarily how far you get, it's also who you play and who you beat, because you can stagger through rounds 3 and 4 and get to the 5th round and then get beat, as Leeds did, I think, by Fulham, in which case you could call that a run in the sense that you've had more than one game, but it doesn't feel like it particularly. It needs to be I think what they did under Warnock in the League Cup, when they ended up playing Chelsea at Elland Road, that is a cup run properly.
If we got a Premier League side at home in the 5th round and beat them,
yes, then we're in cup run territory.
Which would actually immediately cast my mind back to the cup run in 1987 when they got QPR at home at Elland Road and the place was absolutely bouncing. They were in the top division at the time. We weren't. So immediately made me think of that. But I was just going to say, so we can't bask in our cup glory forever. As nice as it was at Peterborough, we need to get back to the league, don't we?
What are they going to do, Phil? Because the FA Cup final and the playoff final are on consecutive days, aren't they?
Yeah, Johnny Buchan at the BBC
was
tweeting about this, and I thought he may have been slightly premature in worrying about it.
I can't remember where I was
surprised that Michael's worrying about that, I have to say.
I suppose with the bus tour, will just be on one. They'll probably just do one for that, won't they, for the dual
for
FA
both
Cup.
trophies.
Both trophies.
The answer to that is just get promoted automatically.
Yeah.
And then, you've got a couple of clear weeks, yeah.
Well, that is a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about. But I was going to say somebody did check, and I can't remember who it was that checked, because I've just seen it knocking about on Twitter, so please forgive me for not crediting the right person. But they said in the event that a team did get to both, they would move the Championship playoff final a week earlier, I think it is.
Yes, I think that is basically the plan.
But,
yeah, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here slightly. 2
trips to Wembley in 2 weeks. How much? That's the problem, isn't it? Accommodation prices and all that.
No price too high. Have you seen? I mean, joking aside, have you seen the price of hotels for that weekend?
Yeah.
Hideous.
Yeah.
Hideous.
You'd sleep in your car, wouldn't you, Michael?
I mean, I would anyway, to be perfectly honest. I see no reason. Well, I'll probably just be trained down hiding in the toilets as usual.
Yeah. That East Coast main line, eh? Back to the league then, and it's down to Cardiff. And it's quite a tricky tie, this one. I feel like this one is perhaps, given the away form, and we've had the distraction of the Cup, eyes will focus back on the league. I feel like Leeds need to make a bit of a statement in this one, because the away form it's bordering on problematic now, isn't it?
A bit of a litmus test. I think it is less Leicester away, Ipswich away, those type of games, and more Stoke, away,
reassert yourself.
Stoke away, Sunderland away, that sort of game where you think you should be winning it and you think you should be going there and playing well. And if you don't do either of those, then questions will be asked, as they have been recently. The away form is a problem because the tally of defeats is too high. And I think if you'd had 6 defeats across the season at this point, home and away, you would say, well, it's not bad form. But there's quite a sort of glaring contrast between how it's going at Elland Road and how it's going away from home. I mean, I have to say, they've had some very good performances away from home. Ipswich was one, I felt. Leicester in particular. They've had good results when they haven't necessarily played particularly well, thinking of Norwich. But they have also been in this pattern of not quite being able to get in front, conceding sometimes to a fairly, shabby goal, and then not really knowing how to dig it out from there, which I think has been the problem recently, and was the problem at Preston, although Preston was a bit of an unfair example because of the red card for Millie, but they hadn't looked good before he was sent off. West Brom, I think, and I suspect that the reason there was so much frustration after West Brom was because it felt like you were going through the same routine that you'd seen previously, and again, there wasn't really a way of resolving it. I would say that Farke is aware of how people are feeling about that and what they're seeing.
Just looking at the away form on FOTMob, and you can break the table down into obviously the normal full table, there's home and away. We're actually about on par in the table with where we should be with the away form versus the overall table. We're currently 5th, but only by virtue of 1 goal difference with Millwall. The teams above us, Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton. So it's reflected in the normal... the away form is reflected in the normal table, basically, with a few little outliers. So we're about where we should be. Again, it's Leicester and Ipswich, and to an extent Southampton skewing the division, isn't it? Skewing our opinion of it. And I guess, in a way, Phil, is the home form skewing our vision of what the away form should be as well? Perhaps
it is. This is what I'm saying. You would expect it to be maybe 4 defeats away from home, 2 defeats at home, as opposed to unbeaten at Elland Road, but actually stacking up the sort of tally of defeats away that would drop you down into mid-table if that was consistent, right the way across the season. There are definitely things for Farke to address with it, and I think the biggest one from my point of view has been the kind of reaction to the scenarios in which Leeds are trailing and need a goal, where it just hasn't seemed to function, and the strategy that he goes for with 3 at the back and pushing men on hasn't really paid off. I think he'll know that in order to stay in touch with the top two, that is going to have to sort itself out. And I guess the games that are coming up, Cardiff, Bristol City, Swansea, Plymouth, long trips, so not easy. But they do kind of fall into the category of games that you need to be winning if you're going to be, cracking on and actually making a dent on what's above you. Safe to say that Leicester have gone, I think. I mean, they just are going up. The big threat at the moment seems to be Southampton, really, doesn't it? When it comes to second place, that and I don't know whether people out there feel particularly optimistic about Leeds still having a chance of finishing second. I think if it carries on in this kind of pattern, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll be far off, but I think they'll fall short. But Ipswich have had a bad spell, and I think that'll be the frustration for Farke, is that a lot of points have been spilled by Ipswich, and the gap hasn't really come down.
I'm optimistic of it.
You're always optimistic.
What's the point? I mean, why bother watching football if you don't believe? If you can't,
ask the man.
And I know we've got the arch realists. I did, cynical kind of guy here, but I do genuinely believe that we should be striving for it. And even if it does prove too difficult, it's well within our grasp, I think.
We should definitely be striving for it. Yeah.
I mean, not that we're not.
I mean, you say what's the point of watching it? But I mean, I did go to Ellen Road throughout the years of Grayson leaving to, I guess, Monk arriving. I was there throughout that. But
you always go on the hope, on the premise that there will be a better day further down the line, don't you?
I suppose so. I suppose I'm remain fairly optimistic this season, just because I think on the day we've shown we can beat anyone. I think we have the players to win any game in this division. It's just
what happens on the day.
Yeah, and we've made it difficult for ourselves in certain games. But now we have Europe's best striker, probably the world's best striker in Pat Bamford.
Puskas Award winner.
Now fit and firing. Yeah. And do you think he stays in and we bring Rutter in for Pirro?
It's probably the key decision this weekend, isn't it?
I would, because this is the question I asked you. Do you think he was maybe looking at a new way to break teams down, Farke, by playing Bamford leading the line with Rutter just tucked in behind him? And there was a kind of a bit of reverse justification for not having dropped Rutter back to number 10 before. He said it's taken him time to learn that position. So it seems like he's kind of paving the way for that being a way forward now, saying we didn't try it before because he wasn't quite ready, but now he's ready.
Yeah, I wonder if against Birmingham, because it's not as if Leeds have actually struggled at home at all, is it? They've been very good at picking teams off, and even if it's taken a bit of graft and a bit of effort of getting there in the end. But it would seem odd to me if, having got Bamford into form and having got his confidence up for the first time in a long time, and I listened to the coach from after the Peterborough game where he was saying, I'm always full of confidence and this, that and the other, but it doesn't always look like that, from where we're sitting. And I think I always have him down as a confidence player, somebody who when he's feeling it and feeling good is going to give you far more, whereas you do get some players who can just perform at a level irrespective of where they kind of are mentally, particularly on the back of that goal at Peterborough, but I think on the back of what's been his best week in ages, Bamford. I mean, such a long time. It would make sense to me to keep him in the team. And I was writing about this earlier this week and saying, he is quite streaky, Bamford. Without the streaks going on endlessly, you do find, and you have found more than once, that one goal leads to 4 or 5 or 6. So this would be like I would have thought, a pretty good time to invest in him and to say, and because actually he played really well against Birmingham. I think that's the point. He did score, but I thought he had a really good game, and I thought he caused them enough trouble to make me think, there was more to that than Birmingham just being hopeless, which they were. He was good. So on the basis that I wouldn't say Pirro has exactly been tearing it up, and on the basis that, judging by Farke's own selection policy, he seems to see Bamford more as a 9 than Pirro, I would have thought that the Rutter-Bamford combination is the one to go for.
Yeah, you'd stick with it, wouldn't you?
I think so.
And
yeah,
pretty much as you were with the rest of it. The rest of it pretty much picks itself, do we think?
Meslier back in, Rodon in, Ampadu back to midfield. I guess that all reshuffles.
Yeah, I did see some people saying Klaasen's done well over the past couple of games. I don't think they've been good enough examples, those games, to make you think that changing back to Meslier would be a mistake. I think they were almost the perfect games, to cover for the fact that there was no Meslier, there was no Darlow, that Klaasen was getting thrown in. And it wasn't that he did badly at all. But I think if you're looking at those and saying that's evidence that Klaasen should get a run now, I'm not sure I would go along with that particularly. And Mellier's been his first choice. So if Mellier's back, then you assume that happens. The one thing that I've wondered away from home is whether Archie Gray in the midfield just gives you a bit more attacking threat and a bit more attacking thrust, and also gives you a bit more of, you know, that killer pass, which he's very, very good at. You know, it's one of his big strengths. And it's, I guess, a less safe approach than, say, Ampadu and Kamara together. But it might be advantageous to have somebody like that in your team, you know, who gives you a bit more. But then again,
right back,
somebody needs to play it right back.
Yeah.
And there is Shackleton, you know, he is fit again.
It feels to me at this stage like it's more likely to be Archie Gray
At right back.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Interesting weekend actually. This one in the Championship. I'm just looking at the pertinent fixtures at the top end. So the 3 o'clock kickoffs, apart from Leeds going to Cardiff, you've got Coventry hosting Leicester. And I know we were saying like it feels like Leicester are pretty much gone, but because I've got the home and away form tables open here in front of me, I was just looking at Coventry's home record, and it's actually pretty strong. They've only lost once at home, drawn a lot of games, won 5, drawn 7, lost 1. They don't concede a lot of goals at home, so that'll be an interesting test for Leicester, I think, that one. But if you exclude that one from the whole discussion, you've got Southampton against Sheffield Wednesday, which you would expect them to win. On the balance of probability, even though Sheffield Wednesday are on a little bit more of a streak now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Cardiff were there in the FA Cup and got a good hiding, although it was a weird game. 2 penalties saved, scored an own goal, loads of changes, got beat 4-0, so it was kind of odd all round. So there's no magic of the cup down there for them. But Southampton at home to Wednesday, I watched Southampton at home to Plymouth, and I was pretty impressed, actually, with the way in which they got that one done. I can see this being exactly the same.
So Southampton, if they do beat Sheffield Wednesday, will knock Ipswich temporarily out of the automatics, if that happens, because Ipswich kick off against Sunderland at 5:30. So that adds an interesting spin on that, because they're not in great form at the minute. Last 5, they haven't won a game, have they, Ipswich?
They've dropped a lot of points, yeah.
As you were saying, it's the frustrating aspect from Farke's point of view. So it's a real opportunity for Leeds to maybe get involved in a group that's could be coming a bit more compacted together, maybe a little bit at the top, do you think?
What you're saying is win games if others lose games, and the table will change.
Well said, Phil.
Yes.
You should do this for a living.
Science. Yeah, I think we're probably going to talk like this for weeks and weeks, aren't we? Because this is how it is.
I was going to say, do you think we'll talk like this from now until about April, when the proper shape of the table takes form? Probably,
yeah, which I suppose explains why Farke's trying hard not to talk about it until April, because you could just get sucked into it every single press conference, couldn't you, about closing the gap or the gap stretching or whatever else. And he's basically right in what he says, that there comes a crunch point, doesn't there, where results actually, individual results start to define everything. But there's no denying that over a long season, you have to be in good form right the way through it and chasing gaps. I mean, you know, you're talking about Coventry, Leicester there. I just see no way in which anybody reels Leicester in now in the way that drags them down to third.
Yeah, you feel like they might lose the odd game, but they're so far ahead that it's going to be hard.
I don't know if you saw it, but there was a very funny tweet on Twitter this week, or X, from an Arsenal fan who was talking about the number of days or weeks that they'd spent at the top of the table versus the number of weeks that Manchester City had spent at the top of the table, but had obviously won the title, and was suggesting that would be a better way of doing it, of deciding the title.
Yeah, it was. Surely there's got to be a more accurate way of working it out.
Use the great phrase, the 38 game merchants, i.e. those who believe in seasons, as opposed to just arbitrary mathematical calculations that put your club at the top of the league.
Obviously, that's from like the end of last season, isn't it? But what if you follow the chain of discussion down, you see how they do that internet thing of just doubling down rather than, do you know what? Yeah, actually, you can't really argue against the league table as a metric.
Was it Arsenal fans who ended up in the discussion as well as to whether someone was 28 or not?
Oh, was it 28? He was 28 until he's 29.
He's 20 nearer 29 than 28. It's like, yeah, but he's 28 until he's 29. He's 28.
Yeah, I couldn't quite work out why that had resurfaced, that stat, but it was really funny. And you start out by thinking, this has got to be a parody, no? Like, at some point you're going to realise that this is just an absolute wind-up, and you're right, you know.
There's somebody in the replies, I think it was a fellow Arsenal fan with a brilliant moment of clarity, who just says in there, you do realise that fans of other clubs can see this, mate, don't you?
Delete.
They're going to be absolutely all over this. Yeah.
Can't we claim our title for, was it 2000 or 2001, when we were, like, across the calendar year, we had the most points?
Yeah.
That's a win.
Champions for the year.
That's a win for definite.
In terms of going to Cardiff then, They are currently 9th, but again, you put it into that bracket of teams.
I thought you were going to ask me for a motorway route there. M1, M42, yeah.
They concede a lot of goals. They score a fair amount. They've got a fairly neutral goal difference. It's +1. They've won 11. They've lost 11. They seem to win or lose to Cardiff. It's a game that Leeds should be winning. Even on the basis of the first game of the season, where Leeds really didn't have it all together at all, I thought we looked better than them.
Yeah, I agree.
But does that translate
Basically
into
conceded on the 2 occasions, give or take?
Does it translate into a winning performance today? And I'm just looking again, going back to the home form. They're not that good at home in terms of the form table.
You can really tell Dan's just discovered the home and away league table. He keeps talking about it.
It's a revelation. You press a button. You press a button and it reorganises them all. It's amazing. You want to try it? They are 12th in the home form table at the minute.
They look to me like. Do you remember the position that Leeds always used to be in, or perennially used to be in, for ages and ages and ages, where it could be the playoffs because you're kind of close enough, but you know deep down it's not going to be the playoffs. And
I'm going to use this table every week
because they're excellent. They're not that far off 6th at all, but they've got that vibe that they're going to be not far off 6th for a long time, but they're never going to be 6th. And I mean, I have to say, when I saw them on the first day of the season, I was not impressed, and I thought they might. I know they very nearly won that game, but I wondered if they might have a bit of trouble this season, which clearly they're not going to. You know, they're going to stay up. They haven't had much use of Aaron Ramsey because he's been injured.
That comes as a surprise.
Yeah, it does really. So the sort of glorious homecoming hasn't quite worked out. They don't like Leeds, would be my observation over many years. Who does, I suppose? But at Cardiff, at the Cardiff City Stadium or whatever it is now, it's not like it was at Ninian Park. I only had one experience of Ninian Park, which was enough. But
that was the one where you were a coward and hid, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, and left Yorkshire Radio to deal with the incoming fire. That was their fault.
Did you find that your Scottish accent became more pronounced when you were there?
No, you see, I didn't actually. I was further up the road. I didn't actually have to get involved in that at all, or lie about where I was coming from. But it was somewhat wild. I remember at the Cardiff City Stadium seeing Domino's pizzas getting delivered to somebody in front of the press box at halftime and thinking, this is a bit different, ever so slightly. So it's not quite the same kind of atmosphere down there. I wouldn't say that Leeds' record in Cardiff is amazing, but then again, different squads, different teams, different coaches. You're right. As I say, it falls into, along with Swansea and Bristol City and Plymouth, you've got to be taking a decent number of points from these games.
Do we play our special teams? Do we unleash Sonny Perkins, freshly back from his successful loan stint in Oxford?
I would say no.
No? You're not fancying that?
I just don't think it'll happen.
No. He's, actually just on that very briefly, he's made an interesting position for himself, hasn't he? Been sent back from Oxford. He can't go back out on loan anywhere else because he's played for us as well this season. So as you say, you can't play for 3 clubs in 1 year.
Which was the Spence dilemma.
Yeah.
Well, I say dilemma. Spurs didn't want to create a situation where he can go either.
Yeah. So it's Leeds or Oxford. So it's Leeds, isn't it? And it's the 21s.
Yeah. A long way from the picture at the moment, definitely. And actually, I mean, Leeds, it was quite a hassle getting hold of him from West Ham. West Ham were really unhappy about the way he was taken from them in their view, and the way in which it was done. But I don't know, as you cut through the signings that have been made at academy level, specifically with decent amounts of money spent on them, or where Leeds have gone out to recruit in the kind of 18, 19-year-old category as opposed to the 9, 10-year-old category, there aren't that many of them that look like working. No. Anyway, let's not finish on a negative. Are we going to win at Cardiff or what? You tell me. Well, you know what I'm going to say. You're going to say yes? Yeah. There's a chance, Michael, isn't there? There's a chance. There's a chance. I'm just reminded of I think it must be the last time we played there. It was after COVID, wasn't it? It was the first game back. That's right. All full of optimism. Yeah. We went there, we lost 2-0, and it was like, that was a weird day. This feels thoroughly Leedsy all of a sudden. Especially with that, it was such a long run up as well with the COVID break, wasn't it? Such a long run up. Forshaw had said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna piss the league or whatever." Yeah. It's not quite in those words, and they did, and we did in the end. But we came back and watched that game, and everyone was like, "Oh no." I forget what his exact words were, but it was more kind of considered than Janssen, who just used to walk into press conferences and say, "There's no way we're not getting in the playoffs." followed by 3-3 draw with Norwich and season over. You know, it was great to quote with Janssen. I mean, good player as well, but you know,
I can't believe you, Phil Hay, are accusing other people of making bold claims about getting the playoffs.
Absolutely, that must be where it came from. You see, although I think I'd probably already blown it before then anyway, so it's my fault generally. But we'll portion a bit of blame to Janssen. Yeah, I think if Leeds win this down at Cardiff, it'll be very similar to the Blackburn game in that it'll require a lot of effort, a lot of graft. It might not be particularly pretty spectacular, might need a couple of good goals, but they've got it in them to win this, yeah. Yeah,
and it would put us within 4 points of Ipswich, ahead of Ipswich kicking off.
What will it do to the away table?
I don't want to get into that. Don't want to get into that. You can look at it yourself afterwards.
Remind everybody of the website. Subscribe.
Right, we'll wrap it up there then. We'll get back together after the weekend then, and we'll have a chat about how it went at Cardiff and how much you enjoyed your journey back, Phil. So enjoy the journey down and back.
Fantastic, I will do.
Is it a good 10-hour round trip?
It will be something like that. Got a few podcasts lined up, including yours, obviously.
Good stuff. Yeah, I presume you listen to this one over and over again.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
How you could improve your performance.
Yeah. in many ways.
Jesse Marshall will have done about another 4 or 5 by the time the weekend comes around.
And what he would say is as well, if I'd have been on that podcast, if only I'd have said something different, it would have sounded better.
That's right. A little bit like if it was only based on the away table rather than the home table, it'd be like this.
Fotmob.com it was that I found that, by the way. Anybody who's interested, see you on Monday.
The Square Ball Podcast.